to ask. Hopefully I can see your questions in the chat box as we're chatting, but I'll reserve some time at the end too for you to ask any questions as well, so you can make sure and get all of your questions in. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so you guys can see my presentation. And I'm not sure if you'll be able to see my face during all of this, but I think you can. Okay, so today we're going to talk about portrait and lifestyle work. And I find that this is something that people really love to hear about, because lifestyle work can be kind of challenging if you're not sure how to approach it. But this is a photo I took actually in, I think it was Cologne, Germany, in a really cool old church hotel that they had converted. I actually used a tripod to shoot this photo and used Fujifilm remote app to shoot it. So when I say that this gear has really changed the way that I approach my job and push new work out, I really do mean it. It's been a game changer for me. And I use GFX solely for all my commercial clients. And I use a lot of like more X series for every day-to-day life and for my kids and things like that, just because it's a little bit more low profile. I can throw it in a bag and it's just super simple. Not that GFX isn't, but X series is just really tiny and easy for on the go things, especially if you're traveling and you just want like something a little more compact. But so we'll dive right in. So if you don't know a little bit about my background, you can search me online. There's my _ Kara Mercer is my handle for all my commercial work. I use that one pretty much solely now. And I actually started in Texas about 15 years ago. So I came from a wedding background. I learned a lot about lighting in that time frame, a lot about taking portraits. And so it really led me to this path of being a commercial photographer. And it kind of happened slowly. I picked up my life from Texas and moved to Seattle, not knowing anyone, which was wild. And I started doing more adventure type work and hiking and things like that. And it eventually led me to working for many different types of brands. So these are some of the brands that I've worked for in the last few years. Some of them are tourism brands or hotels or airlines, clothing brands. And I just did one for Veuve Clicquot. If you've heard of them, they have champagne from France, and it was really amazing. So I'll share those later in November on my Instagram, but until then I can't really put those out, which is probably the story of my life. I have so much work backlog that I haven't been able to share, but I really want today to be about all of you. And the only reason I want to preface these things is just so you can kind of see what experience I've had, and then you can kind of formulate your questions from there. So you leave this today feeling like you really got a lot out of this and it can help you move forward. Because if there's one thing that I've learned on my journey, is finding people to educate you and to really push you forward is really important. And it's something I've become passionate about within my career in the last 15 years. So I do a lot of mentoring and teaching, and Fujifilm has been amazing, and I've gotten to know such amazing people from that. So within these, you're seeing like some of the experience that I've had. These are some dance shots that I recently shared. I don't know if this chat button, by the way, is actually showing up anything, but it won't let me look at it, just FYI. I thought I'd throw that out there because I saw the chat bar pop up, but I can't actually click on it. So just save any questions. You can throw them in the chat and I'll read them once I close this screen sharing. Okay, so these are some other types of jobs. I've worked for many different magazines shooting lifestyle content, also for tourism boards and for different companies as well. So even now I shoot a lot of lifestyle fashion content for brands. I just did a shoe brand a month ago, and I just love this type of work. It's really fun for me to kind of explore and get out in nature and mix that with fashion, or whether it be gathering and dining and things like that as well. So you'll see a variety of different types of work that I've created, but these are some of the topics that I want to address today that really I feel like has set my work apart. And I hope that it helps you as well in your journey with photography. So some of the foundations we'll chat about are your voice and your aesthetic, art direction. If you don't know what that is, I'm going to talk a little bit through that. Finding locations, editing, gear, lighting, and then how to create a story that actually resonates with people. So hopefully that sounds good to all of you since I can't see your faces, but so we'll kind of jump right in, and I just wanted to touch on these things, like what makes a portrait interesting. So much of the time, I think we stare at a photo and we're not sure, like, oh, wow, I love that photo, but I don't know why, like, what about it resonates so much to me? And I think these are the key fundamentals of creating a beautiful portrait. I think you have to really hone in on your framing, the light that you use. And I think sometimes what's unexpected is really what catches my eye now. I think after 15 years of looking at work, even my own work, I'll kind of think, oh, how could I have done this differently or changed the way I shot it, or maybe the framing that I chose. Also the movement and feeling. Sometimes I'll have the model listen to some music and I'll let them choose what we're going to listen to throughout a shoot. And it just kind of lowers the guard that most people have when they're getting their portrait taken. And I think everybody just tends to have fun and kind of relax a little bit more. And then we think of ideas together to execute. So that's kind of what happened in the shoot right here. I framed her head. If you look at the right image on your screen, the horizontal image, I framed her head in a way where it's like above the floor because the floor was more gray. So I wanted her to be in a lighter contrast area for the framing. And then the concept was kind of this idea of like spring and dying, like spring dying and florals, kind of like the beautiful decay of florals, but also how they can be beautiful through all stages of their life. And so it was really fun to create this. So that kind of leads us right into what I'm going to talk to you about. So your voice and your aesthetic and art directing creates a curated portfolio. And I think this is something that a lot of people don't tend to think about when they're taking a portrait. I think there are scenarios where you'll go outside and you'll practice taking portraits, or maybe you're outside with a friend and you're still learning all your camera settings. But the beauty of this is once you've kind of figured out how your camera works and how to get your manual settings the way you want them, these topics are really important in order to create a portfolio that really stands out. And I'll be the first to say I was not 1,000% amazing at this when I started as well. It takes time to really curate your voice and your aesthetic, but it starts with these fundamentals. So for your voice and aesthetic, I think you have to think about what you want in your frame and maybe taking things out of your frame. And sometimes if, say, for instance, her ceramic wheel was sitting in an area that was really dark in a shadowy corner, but I knew we could probably move it. Those are easy things for me to speak up and say, oh, let's move your wheel over to the light, and maybe let's put in some natural elements like wood chairs. And that's just kind of how this shot came to play, is just allowing things to be natural and pulling them out of like darker areas and creating a space that's just really beautiful. So you notice the portraiture more than anything. And also it's about playing. I think I just wanted them to play with the clay and take some fun photos. And the cool thing about this is a ceramicist in Portland, and I did a project a few years back about female creatives, and both of these were part of that project. And so I experimented with just really creating a natural storyline to work with. And I was consistent with the lighting, the toning, and just styling. Sometimes you need to style your subjects and direct them, and like, if they ask you, oh, what do you think about this outfit or these colors? Think about where you're going to shoot and whether those tones are going to complement the location that you're choosing, or if it's going to take away from it. So that's just something I always try to think about, how to be cohesive in what I'm shooting and what I'm putting out in the world and my branding. So also, these are some other photos. You're going to laugh when I tell you that I shot this in a parking lot because we could not find the right place to shoot. And this is like a confession on my part. The makeup artist and I were chatting through this whole shoot, and she was like, "Oh yeah, we can use the front of the garage and shoot there. It'll be no problem." And so I get there and I'm like, "Oh no, there's like a concrete piece that will literally mess up the backdrop." And so I thought to myself, well, shoot, where else can we like shoot this and roll out the backdrop? So we have this beautiful green color with the florals, and there just wasn't anything in the neighborhood because, as you know, Seattle has lots of hills and little areas that have like messed up concrete and stuff. So long story short, I was like, let's just make our way toward the beach where we're shooting the second portion. And we found this parking lot, and I literally rolled out a backdrop in this parking lot and found good light, and we're all just working around them in the parking lot. So that being said, don't settle on shooting somewhere that just doesn't feel right to you, because you're gonna not like the images. And there's so many moving parts to these shoots that takes so much time to plan and execute that you just really want to walk away from your work feeling like it's beautiful and it's everything that you wanted it to be, especially if you're hiring people or you're managing people for shoots. These were actually shot for Bellevue Lifestyle magazine. I shoot for them pretty much every month for different types of features, but this was for their sustainable fashion feature. And I love the way they turned out. And I'm so glad I didn't just settle on that weird curb that would have messed up our backdrop. So that being said, lighting also makes such a difference in sharing your voice and your aesthetic. I love natural lighting. So every shoot that I have, I either create natural lighting with ProPhoto, or I'm using like golden light, or I'm filling and using both at the same time, which is what I did with these. So these are just some tips on how to really button up your aesthetic. And the number one thing is consistency. Make sure your toning is consistent, things you're sharing, because it's not just the voice or the font or editing style. These things, I think people get so caught up on these, like these feelings of their website, and they just think too much about the font and the feel of that they don't actually look at their portfolio and weed out things that don't make sense. Sorry for my half-assed version there. I think that was my mom Texan in me that's like, you want to really button things up and make it beautiful and speak to what's true to you. So that's what I would recommend, is just go through your portfolio or things that don't speak to you, and maybe ask yourself why, and what is it that you can change about future shoots that you have and make it more true to what you want to be creating. Okay, so then the next thing that we'll chat about is art directing. Art directing is super fun, in my opinion, and it's basically like this challenge because there's what's called production value when you're on set or you're working with companies. There's tiny changes that you can make that make all the difference in your photo standing out or just kind of being lackluster. So styling is a big one. Working with your subjects to make it feel natural. Sometimes I think we force things and we don't just let people be in that space and let those actions just be natural to them. So you'll see an array of different types of shoots that I've done. So you'll see I've styled like some of the food. That actually took a while just to get it just right, and the framing. But the point of seeing all of this variety of work is so you can understand that I'm making tiny movements. Like even the hand shot where she's holding the little floral, I had her move her hand down so it wasn't two hands overlapping each other, and there's one above and then you have the hand below, so it looks really delicate and dainty. Sometimes having too much hand toward the camera can feel really heavy. So I have people turn their hand where it's like less of their hand facing the camera. So there's just little bitty things that you can be adjusting. The other one that I would recommend is where you place your subjects in the frame. If you look at the photo to the far left where she's standing and you see the reflection of the pool, this was shot for Post Hotel out in Leavenworth. I shot a lot of their content in the last few years, and I placed her head specifically in that open panel window so the lines wouldn't be distracting and they're actually framing her. So always remember these things, that you need to focus on contrast, your light, create like a positive environment. There's nothing worse than someone feeling like down by the way you communicated with them. So you go so much further if you just say, I love what you're doing, maybe try doing this instead. And then explain to them why you feel that their hand should shift a little bit, and then say you're doing a great job. I'm just trying to adjust tiny things to make the frame that much better. And that's just how I communicate with people to make my art direction in the frame really stand out. So I know we talked about that, just empowering people, small details, having your model turn a little bit toward the light, or even popping a reflector in this frame, filled her like right side of her face, I guess left side if you're looking at the screen. So make sure you're framing things in a way that really complements your subject, and also conveys emotion. This girl in particular was very new at modeling, and I shot these out at Scribe Winery in California. And this was before they like tore down the hacienda, and it was like the last shoot that they had, which was really cool that we got to shoot there before they renovated everything. But I'm always looking to create emotion, and I had her kind of look down and then look right back up at the camera. And sometimes I'll ask them various questions where they can kind of think through some emotions, so it feels like more, there's more connection between the camera and me, or even just talking to them aside before you're shooting. That really helps people, especially that are younger or newer, or maybe not comfortable in front of a camera, to kind of let their guard down and be more natural in front of your camera. And also animals. This is always a funny one. Animals can be very hard to kind of direct, but you can set yourself up for success if you're in an open field, or just pick a location that's simple and not overdone. There's not a lot of lines that you have to watch for, because you're already going to need to watch for where you're framing them. And if you don't have to worry about lines going upwards or leaning, that's super helpful, especially for photographing animals or different types of events. Movement makes such a big difference. And I'm not going to lie to you, with this one, I was like, oh, this could get really dicey with this thing flying at the camera. You know, you never know if it could just like hit me or the camera. So what I did was have him bounce the ball so he wasn't actually hitting it toward me. And I wasn't worried if he was going to like knock the lens over or something wild. I also had them set up like the horses where they crossed each other. And then I had them hold their polo sticks. Forgive me if I'm saying this wrong, because I'm not a polo guru. But I had them hold them at the same angle, so it wasn't where it wasn't unbalanced. So there's so much about this scene that you think it just naturally happened that way, and it's just not true. So I say that because I want to be honest with you about how to create this type of work and how to be safe doing it, and create an environment where you're obviously like people trust you, and you can create really dynamic shots. So I just kind of had them move along in the field and cross each other a few times. And that's how I shot the image on the left. And the image above, I had the son go across the back, and then the father's like in the front. So this was about a father and son polo, like basically this is like for an equestrian team in Seattle. So these types of jobs are super fun to shoot, but it can be a little bit challenging if you're not sure how to direct someone. So if you just think in your brain, how can I create a shot that's dynamic and interesting, and I can create movement in the scene? And don't be afraid to ask people to do something. It may not work the first time. There were certainly scenarios where I tested them out in this and I was like, well, that doesn't give me what I'm looking for, so we're going to try something else. So don't be afraid to ask for that, because I think people are always willing to make a really cool shot with you. The other thing is, we talked about location a little bit a minute ago, about how you don't choose a busy location if you're trying to capture movement. This is another great example of choosing a location that's cohesive. So I did a motherhood project that it was about motherhood and careers, and it spoke to just many different type of women that are doing the hustle of managing being a mom and a parent, but also working on their career and doing something outside of their home as well. So what I was trying to convey with this is the beauty in these women and how they're from various walks of life, various nationalities. And the way I did that was using the same backdrop paper with every single person. And I used the same lighting setup. And then because I shot this in San Francisco, LA, and Seattle. And as you can imagine, the lighting was completely different in every single one. So having this like cohesiveness and choosing a backdrop that not only makes their skin tone stand out, but it allows you to focus on the subjects more than you notice the actual like backdrop or the location, and it's less busy. So I took away all the distraction and just focused on cohesion and the subjects and how their connection is with their children. Feel free to ask any questions about any of this too in the chat box, and I'll answer them as we go, or actually I can't click on it as we go, but afterwards. And this is like a complete opposite example of that and how to choose like outdoor locations. So this was for Pauline Paris, which they have amazing bags and they're just really beautiful. And I photographed them here with 3 different models. And part of this was to feature the bags, but also just feature all of these models in nature, because I love the mix of nature with models. So I chose an outdoor location that had beautiful like rock structure behind it. And then I also shot toward the sky where we could have just very minimal like environment around them, where you could tell we're outside, but it's not overly posed or it's not a busy location. So choosing things that either add to your like concept or take away, that's the biggest thing to think of in your location. And if you think about the big picture before you get there, that's always really, really helpful. So think about the styling, the makeup, the bags, how are they going to be featured or look with the styling and the makeup, and the location that you've chosen. So we'll kind of transition a little bit to talking about the editing. So once you've kind of gone to these locations and you've created these beautiful images and you feel like you've made them true to your aesthetic and your voice, the biggest thing that it comes down to is creating editing and even your own presets. All of my work has its own presets, so I create them for every single shoot that I have. Sometimes there will be scenarios where I shot something in California and I know the light's similar from this shoot to one that I'm about to edit, and I can work off of some of those older presets that I created. But just know that start somewhere with a baseline. If you have presets you like, or if you are still trying to create them, I think that speaks more truer, or it's truer to your work and your vibe that you're going for if you just have a preset that really matches you, because you may love somebody's work and buy their presets, but they may be shooting with a different camera, and sometimes those tones are different. So for instance, like some cameras have just different color profiles if you aren't familiar with that. And you just have to know that if you're switching from one camera brand to another, that you need to have like consistent presets. So that's one thing that I've loved with Fujifilm, to be honest. Like I love that I can change the Kelvin within my camera. I do that for most of my shoots. I change Kelvin, and then all of my presets have just really been an amazing tool for me to make my work be set apart from most. So feel free to save any questions about editing. These are some other things. I tend to remove anything that's distracting. This can be a hard decision for people that are new for portraits. They're like, oh, I don't want to like take too much out of it. There was a shoot that I did recently of a couple that was married or is married for 73 years. And I didn't retouch any of their skin because I felt like it was just so beautiful and amazing to see the life that they had shared. So, but if there's like bruises or something like that, or cuts, I'll always go in and take that out because it's not permanent. If it's for a beauty, obviously I'm retouching skin a bit more. So just really think through the platforms that you're using. Fujifilm has an amazing skin smoother within GFX, which is super, super helpful if you're shooting commercial work. I would just recommend turning that on and testing it out. And then I also use Lightroom, Alien Skin, and then Luminar for a lot of my editing too. So we'll get to gear. Gear is probably the one that you're like most curious about. If you guys haven't tried Fujifilm gear, I'll be the first to tell you. I originally started on Canon, and I'm not saying anything negative about anyone. I think gear is one of those things where you learn on something, and then after a while you start asking yourself, oh, I should try something and see like what I feel about this gear. Or there's so many aspects to kind of evaluate when you're in this space, and whether you're shooting for a client and you're shooting professionally, or you're shooting as a hobby. I think it's really important to ask yourself, like, does this gear make my work better? Does the toning that it comes out, the skin tones, how do they look? What is the ease of use of this gear with the lighting that you're using, or just taking it on the go? I can honestly and truly tell you, for me, it's made such a difference for my work. I mean, I've had 2 children now, and let's be real, I don't want to carry anything super crazy heavy anymore. And I carry 2 GFX cameras on every commercial shoot that I go to, and I don't feel bogged down by the end of the day. I feel like the work that I'm putting out is beautiful. The skin tones are beautiful. And I still have people coming to me asking to mentor, and like, oh, well, how do you get your skin tones the way that you do? And I will give so much credit to Fujifilm for that, because yes, I can find good light and I can find good toning and presets, but the quality and the luminosity and skin that comes out of all GFX cameras is just wild. You'll totally get it if you try any GFX camera with like a 110 lens or an 80, and you'll be like, okay, I'm done forever. So these are some of the bodies that I have that I'm using, whether it be for personal use or for fashion, portrait, lifestyle work. So the first set of lenses you're going to see are GFX lenses, and the second set are X series. So the 51.2 X series lens is just phenomenal. I will tell you, if you have not tried that lens, go pick it up. The 80 millimeter, I've had in my hands a few times, but with COVID, it's been a little bit trickier to get the 80 for the GFX. But I fully believe in all of this gear, and it's been such a game changer for me, having the ability to transfer files on set. Like if you shoot in GFX and JPEG, I can just automatically send myself JPEG via the Fujifilm remote app, and I can post things then and there, which is amazing for clients that are like, I really want this photo. And I'm like, well, I won't be home till like 10 p.m. So I just easily transfer it to my phone, and I'm able to edit it and send it to them right then and there. So in that way, it's really enhanced my relationships with my clients and being able to provide consistent work and deliver it a little bit sooner. And so to add to that, I use ProPhoto lighting for B10 and A1X. These are some of the modifiers that I use for a lot of my work. I love dramatic light. I love really beautiful fill light. So I'm always mixing ambient light with like whether it be strobes or the A1X. The A1X packs like a punch, which is really cool to use. I don't shoot a lot of weddings anymore, but when I do, I take the A1X with me, and it's super simple to just use the remote trigger app with the GFX or X series. And you're just easily able to kind of get the shots that you're looking for. So just to kind of wrap on curating this storyline and how to create images that really stand out, I wanted to touch on how to create a story. I think so much of the time we see these beautiful images, and you can really feel when someone thinks about the storyline and how they want to convey these types of images when you see a full series of shots together. So that's kind of what I want to share with you. Some of the time when I'm creating fashion shoots for people, I'm always mapping out or drawing like the scenes, how to transition them visually. So this was toward the end of the Painted Hills scene, and we were just like sitting in the grass, and they were just like laying there laughing, and one of the girls picked up a little flower petal, and I just had her kind of hold it as if they're like picking daisies. And the storyline was that they were sisters, and you could see like this tension. I'm going to show you. So see, you can see this tension in this top image, and I specifically put them above the Painted Hills ridge line so you could see their hands clasping. And then there's a very fashion element to a lot of these other images, the one in black and white. And then I wanted it to end in a way that felt like their tension had been broken, and there's this connection between them at the end. And I thought it was perfect in the way that the light was much more dramatic and softer, and the tones were just more in the gray tone, which I really loved as well. So think about these things when you're doing portraits, whether it's with two models or a couple. There's just scenarios that you can be giving them as prompts or cues to kind of create these more dynamic shots that don't just like happen if you don't kind of allow for an environment or space for them to happen. The other thing that I'll challenge you is don't be afraid of trying different types of light. I would literally go to the park when I first started and just drag light all over the place to see how it looked in a photo. There's just certain ways of just playing and not putting so much pressure on yourself to have the best shot every single time. And sometimes there's like these happy accidents where you're like, wow, I never even thought to do that before, but now I'm gonna like actually use that when I go do the next shoot that I have. And the other thing is, don't force things to be something that they feel awkward. Everything that I'm creating, I'm trying to make it feel as if someone's actually there and they're experiencing those emotions or that environment, or whether it be the beach. This is actually my husband, that I had him stand like on the other side of the puddles so we could get this beautiful reflection. And then, so I'm always putting people in places for them to just look the most like they would be there, and I'm just kind of observing. So that's always the goal in like all lifestyle work, actually. So also, if there are scenes where you're like, oh, I just don't know how to make this feel natural, give people food, coffee, things like a sweater over their shoulders, like, and then ask yourself, like, what would they be doing in this space? And that's kind of how I come up with certain ways to kind of curate a specific shot. These are just some examples of adventure and like where I've placed people in spacing, or even caught people candidly. This guy was like riding a bike in Copenhagen, and I liked that there was like this bright yellow bike in the back. But there's this guy like very focused on going to his job or something, and he's more like contrasted in the foreground. There's always like this play on juxtaposition in feelings and emotions within my work. And I don't think I really realized that that is really what I was aiming for until a couple years into it. So maybe in looking at your own work, ask yourself, like, why do you love this? What is it about this frame, or what could you have done differently to make it resonate more with you? So this is just another example of that. This is out at Lake Wenatchee. We were actually just skipping rocks and the dog kept swimming in there too. And it was an adventure. I wasn't trying to force something to be what it wasn't, or I just wanted it to feel fun and like we're experiencing a place for the first time. And just to throw this out there, I think sometimes people always like want to know about social media and how to kind of put our work out there. So I'll be the first to say, like, social media is amazing for connecting you with people. You never know what brands are watching your work. It doesn't matter how many likes you have. This algorithm is like constantly ever changing in this world. I'll be the first to say. Creating and sharing is what it's all about. Creating work on the go, having cameras that can just go with you wherever you are. Like I shot this photo at a hotel in New York City, and I just kind of had thrown things on the desk and used my X series camera and captured it. So always just be creating wherever it is that you are and share that work. And don't gauge how well a photo is based off of like likes or things like that. The whole goal is just to grow and get better time over time that you're holding your camera. But these are some of the ways that I've kind of grown and gotten better throughout the years and just continue to be on this pace in life. So just share work, strong work that you feel like really resonates with you. Keep honing your skills. Like I was saying, go play at the park, create something interesting, experiment, and then find brands that are in alignment. Even if you're not paid to shoot for a brand, maybe if you already use their products, you could just create some portfolio with that really is something that you love. But the biggest part about this is community. Community makes all the difference, and real friendships in this space that just want to cheer you on and you cheer them on as well. So if you guys have any questions, let's go ahead and take those now. And I just wanted to throw this out there. This is my website. I do a lot of education and mentoring, as well as just say hello on Instagram. That's my Instagram handle. I'm just going to exit this so I can actually answer your questions.
So Kara, there is a question. Somebody wants to know how you get your soft images. Is it lighting?
Let me go back up. How do I get such soft portraits? Maybe the best question would be like, which portrait stood out the most to you? So I guess it's a hard question to answer only because there's so many different types of lighting that I'm using throughout all my work. But the biggest thing that I can tell you is choose light that's either even on someone's face or that they can look at you and it's not super harsh light. I'm always choosing certain times of the day to photograph people. So for instance, in Seattle, it doesn't really matter. It's like a natural softbox all the time, unless it's summer and the light's crazy bright. But I always choose light that's very consistent. So whether that be sunrise or sunset or utilizing golden hour for a lot of portraits. When you're in a place like California, you obviously, if you shoot at midday, choose shady spots to shoot in midday. Don't shoot in overhead light every single time. Does that mean you can't shoot in overhead light? No, you absolutely can. It's just choosing the way that you have someone facing the camera and where the light's coming from. You always want it to fall evenly on their face. Or if you're going from something more moody or edgy, then have it specifically on like maybe their eye or something, because when it's edgy and shadows are on their nose and their nose looks huge, it never helps anyone. So hopefully that helps. Like, feel free to pop any other question that any more specific, Jen, so I can answer that too.
Somebody was asking, what software do you use for editing on your phone?
I use the Lightroom on my phone and I just have presets loaded. The other one that I use is Prime. Prime is really great. It's PRIIME. That one's really helpful. Touch Retouch is great for, surprisingly, Touch Retouch does better sometimes than even like the brush tool in Lightroom. Don't tell them I said that, but it's true. So that one's also a good one if you're trying to take something out, like a poll or anything that's distracting. And yeah, those are pretty much what I use for iPhone.
And there's a question from Brooke. She says thank you. She wants to know what lens you use to capture someone in large landscapes.
Hey, Brooke, thank you so much. I'm glad it was super helpful for you. And so lenses for landscapes, I would actually use, if you're trying to expose the landscape with someone in it, I would use a 23 or something wider because you're going to get more of the scene that gives context to the portrait that you just shot. So anywhere from like a 16 to a 23 is great. An 80 is probably a lot more of a portrait lens. So I would definitely use a 80 for that. But if you're using the GFX, I would do a 32 to 64. That lens is amazing. And all the people that don't think zoom lenses are amazing, I totally disagree. I love that lens and I use it for interiors. I use it for landscapes and for portraiture. So hopefully that helps with landscapes. But if you have any other questions, Brooke, feel free to pop that in.
Yeah, the 32-64 is definitely my go-to lens on the GFX because they resolve over 100 some megapixels, and
yeah,
you get interiors and landscape and even portraits. It's a beautiful lens.
Absolutely.
There is Jen wants to know, for your adventure photos, are you using natural light?
Yes. So on adventure photos, I very rarely bring a light outside. If I'm doing a fashion shoot, I'll probably bring a light, but the Painted Hill shoot that you saw, that was all natural light. And but the shoot that I had with the green background I explained in the parking lot, that had a grid on it with a Profoto strobe. So I think I had a B10 with me for that one. And so there's certain scenarios where I'll pop a light in there, but for the most part, if it's just out hiking and things like that, it's just natural light.
And I think she had a second question. I know you covered it on one of your PowerPoints, which are you using when you mean need more lenses. So I know you use both X series and GFX, and you've been using a lot of the GFX. And you have some general lenses, both prime and zoom.
Mm-hmm.
But I think she's discussing about which one you need more lenses to. Is it the X series? Maybe she's meaning, trying to find out if it's the GFX or the X series.
I honestly love carrying GFX with me for, if anything work, like my clients expect very high resolution for, I mean, the X series will give you amazing resolution. It's like the files are like 6,000 by 8,000, which is amazing. But if there are scenarios where I need more low lighting capabilities, like for instance, interiors, I'll use all GFX for that because I can bracket the images and it's just really beautiful. And the megapixels just make the files so beautiful, and it creates these beautiful shadows and highlights for those as well. I just saw, she said, for the GFX, I would carry a 32 to 64 for hiking, and that's it. The new 50S2 would be amazing for hiking, and carrying a 32 to 64, because you could capture portraits with that lens, you could capture landscapes with that lens. Basically anything that you want to capture on a hike would be perfect for that lens. If you're feeling extra adventurous, take a 250 with you too, because the 250 will get you those beautiful mountain ranges that are farther away, but a 32 to 64 will get you portraiture and any wider landscape shots that you want to be getting on that trip too.
And we do have our new lighter lens, the new 35 to 70. That is much lighter, more compact. So you do have alternative options on that too.
Yeah, that would also be a great one for sure. For tripods, I use Really Right Stuff for their brackets. Those are amazing. So it just stays on my GFX all the time, and I just switch it sides, and it's like a L bracket that sits on it. That's really helpful with a tripod, and I use a Manfrotto tripod. For interiors, I also use Manfrotto, but get that really right stuff bracket. That bracket's amazing for all GFX. I also have one for X series too. So if I'm on a hike or something, I'll use X series gear sometimes too. And like, I'll just put the really right stuff L bracket, because there are a lot of them that you can't get the battery out or you can't get a card back in, but they have like open slots where you can still get things back in, which is nice.
We do have a question from Kent. What is your approach for white balance?
So for white balance, I use a card. It's like a passport card for all interiors or for various types of things. If I feel like it's like a tough space to get the white balance right, I'll use that and shoot the scene. Maybe I'll start at like 5,000 Kelvin. I'm usually anywhere from 5,000 to 5,300 Kelvin. That's mostly where I stick. But there are some hotel rooms that are very blue or very yellow. And then that's where I kind of eyeball it. I'm more of like an eyeball it person and then adjust it, but you never want to change it during a set. I will be the first to tell you, don't adjust your Kelvin unless you're switching scenes completely, because there's nothing worse than creating a preset and it works for like 90% and then you shot the other ones. Say for instance, you shot these in 5,000 Kelvin and you shot these in 55. So then you have to like edit those two sets completely different. Does that make sense?
I have a question.
Okay.
Nobody listed the question, but
I have one.
do you shoot JPEGs and RAW? And do you have specific film simulation, or you do everything with your own presets afterwards on post?
I do really like Classic Chrome. Classic Chrome is the most like my work. And I think it's really beautiful for portraits. There was a challenge we did with Fujifilm maybe a year ago for one of the launches, and I had Classic Chrome as mine, and it was actually really perfect and beautiful. So I would highly recommend using that one. I love the black and white options as well, because there's so much within a portrait that's black and white you can look at. You can see the shadows, you can see the highlights really well in black and white. So it's fun to play with those when you get a chance.
Awesome. Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
I have a question.
Ask away.
I absolutely love your interiors. Do you ever use artificial light, or do you always use just natural light in those? They just are so beautiful.
Thank you. I appreciate you saying that. I use so with summer, I tend to use a lot of natural light whenever it's like California or any places where there's more light coming in. There's a lot of tools that I end up using to block light actually in spaces that are like much brighter. So for instance, here, you have to gauge the type of, or like the time of day to choose like in a house. So I'll walk through a house, look at the rooms and like the lighting throughout a morning. And then I'm like, okay, we need to start here because the light will hit this part of the house first. And then this part will be like overkill bright by the end of the day. So that's kind of how I gauge where to start in a space. And then I'll use like diffusers, like big panel diffusers to kind of like make the light softer. If the shadows are more soft and beautiful and it's really highlighting the space well, I'll leave those alone in the frame. And then recently I just shot one that was like super gray, cloudy day. And I was like, well, this isn't going to work, because there was a window here. And then there was like a living room space where there was a couch here, and it was like really dark over here and really bright over here. So the room was just like so unbalanced. So I took the B10 and I put it like on a low setting on the tripod, popped it into the shadow corner, and then I composited the images together. Okay. So there's one image with no light in it, another image where I popped the light in there in the shadows, and then I compressed them all together. So hopefully that kind of explains how you kill like such imbalance in light, especially for us here in the Northwest, where you have to get really good at gauging how to balance the light.
Yeah. Sometimes I'll do a few like real estate jobs, and it's like, you know, they have fluorescent and incandescent and daylight, and it's just like, oh my gosh.
You know what's funny is real estate's like night and day. Real estate's like all the lights are on. In interiors, nothing is on. Everything is off. There's no like outlets that are turned on, which really helps with the Kelvin, because all light bulbs are really gross and yellow for the most part.
Well, and keeping everything, do you do that in post, keeping all your lines? Because everything that you have just looks like you have a tilt shifter, you know, like everything's perfectly perpendicular. And
I will say for me, the lines on GFX, like just looking at the grid lines when you're shooting really helps to see like if you're completely straight. The other thing that I do is I just get the camera set on the tripod and I look at the grid lines and then I just don't touch it. And then when you bracket the images, it creates these it just creates this beautiful file and this beautiful image that you can then put into Lightroom and adjust accordingly.
Yeah.
The tripods and GFX for the win.
Yeah. I guess you're more kind of creating a vignette of a space as opposed to like with, you know, real estate, you'd be like trying to get more space. So you're using a wider angle. So it's distorting everything a little bit more. So
and the styling really plays a big key in interiors. I can't tell you how we can spend 2 hours fidgeting with like styling in a room, and then the camera, it's interesting what the camera sees and what your eye sees. Because in the camera there can be like 2 items overlapping each other and you're like, well, that looks terrible from this angle. So you have to keep shifting all the like styling and make sure that it really complements itself and creates a balance of composition in the frame.
So do you do the styling, or do you bring in a stylist, or do you take guidance from, you know, a client, or all of the above?
Pretty much all of the above. There are some clients that have stylists. Like I'm doing a shoot for a magazine that's like a home interior magazine in a month, and they are like, we only need 8 photos from the set and we want the raws, and I'm like, and so basically they'll take the raws from the set, and though in those instances, like sometimes I'll help style and we'll look at things and we'll be tethered to capture one, and we'll work together to create the scene and make it look better. And then there are scenarios where there's amazing stylists that bring tons of props and I just kind of help shift things.
It's so fun. That must be so much fun.
Yeah,
I think it would be really fun. Does anybody else have any questions?
I want to say thank you to all of you that posted in the chat box. Thank you so much for your kind words and for sticking around to listen. And if there's any other questions, I'd love to hear them or help with anything.
Yeah. Lewis, do you have any input? Do you want to say anything? Like tell everybody about the deals? And
Bruno's question.
Okay.
Cameras we have for view vloggers. XT4 and then the S10. It's a great cameras for view vloggers. That screen will flip and you can do 4K, 30 and 60. I mean, it's both are great cameras. And one's really good for weather resistant. Another one, it's just a more compact if you want to travel light. And both have in-body stabilization. So it's definitely plenty of choices in our lineup for that kind of work.
For sure.
Yeah. A lot of people enjoyed your presentation, including me.
I'm so glad to hear it. It's hard. It's with a big group. It's like, and you can't ask them much questions. You hope that all the things you go over are relevant to them.
No, yeah, you dropped a ton of information in there. You were just it was great.
I try to just deliver as much, so then you just feel like you left with like lots of nuggets of.
Oh yeah, if this is like the direction you want to go, you just you hit a lot of good points in there. So if anybody has any questions, you can drop them in the chat right now. And otherwise, I will say you guys will get an email after this that will have some deals, and I think I said this before at the beginning, but some coupon codes that you can use online, and kind of some ideas of the deals that we'll have for Fujifilm cameras. We aren't allowed to necessarily publish the pricing, but we always have great in-store pricing. So if there's something that you're looking for, just call the store and we will give you pricing and let you know what deals we're having. We have free shipping on anything over $29, and there's not a lot here that is under $29. So pretty much free shipping on everything. But and if you're in the area, we'd love you to come in and say hello and give Lewis a Heidi ho and look at all the gear. And we have all the newest here. And
I'll be here myself and also Jeff
Yeah.
Today and tomorrow. So we'd love to
Yes.
see you come by and
Yes.
also look at some of the new gear. And also if you need your camera to be updated in firmware, we also could do that too.
Oh, there you go. That's a good
Right
one.
there.
Yeah. Come on in, Carol. We'll take
Yeah.
care of you.
We all do firmware.
Oh, that's right. You're down in Tacoma. I don't know if I drive that
No.
far, but
But that's great.
yeah.
I think that's amazing to just be able to
Yeah.
test it out and have someone help you with firmware if you haven't done it
Oh,
before.
sure. Yeah, yeah, because it can be a little bit daunting if you're not familiar with how it goes. But yeah. So, and you guys go out there and find Kara on Instagram. You're gonna love her feed. It's beautiful. And thank you so much for coming
you, everybody.
and doing this.
Thank you
Yes.
everyone so much for being here, and say hello. Don't be a stranger. And
Thank you, Kara. Good to see you again.
Liz, it's so good to see you. And Heather, thank you. Thank you guys for having me back. It was nice to be here. And
Yeah, yeah.
see all your
We'll have you get
yeah,
like our
please.
like our third time that we've done something together. So
I would
we love
love
having you. Yes, yes. Keep that in mind, Lois. Oh, actually, it's Jeff. I'll have to hit him up for that.
Tell
so.
Jeff I said hi too.
Yeah, yeah. And don't forget, we're going to do the pop-up Fujifilm event at the Stoop Brewing right across the
Mhm.
parking lot here.
Across the
So
parking lot, we'll have all the gear. Bring
yeah,
a SD card. That way you will be able to take some images from any of the cameras you want to demo.
yeah, yeah. It's in our events listing, so you can find it there too. So, but anyway, come to the store. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Thank you, Kara. Thank you, Lewis.
I hope
And
everybody has a good rest of your Friday.
Yes,
Thank
yes. Good weekend coming. Yes. All right, you guys. Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.